we are focusing on a critical skill for your phlebotomy certification exam: handling draws when a patient has an IV line or a heparin lock. The exam will test your understanding of why the primary rule is to prevent contamination and dilution of the blood sample by always selecting a vein in the opposite arm of a running IV. Imagine your patient has a dextrose solution infusing. If you draw from a vein above or even near that IV site, you risk pulling that dextrose-rich fluid into your sample tube. This would falsely elevate a glucose test, leading to a critical diagnostic error. The same applies to electrolytes, medications, or any other substance being infused. The gold standard and the correct answer on your exam is always to use the opposite arm. If that's not possible, a hand vein on the opposite side is an acceptable alternative. Now, let's break down the scenario the exam loves to present. You have no other choice but to draw from the arm with the IV. This is a procedural question, and every single step is a potential answer choice. First, and this is a critical safety and communication step, you must ask the nurse to turn off the IV infusion. You cannot do this yourself. The exam will trick you with options like slow the IV drip or clamp the line yourself. The correct action is to communicate with the nurse. After the nurse has stopped the infusion, you must wait. The standard is at least 2 minutes. Look for that 2-minute mark in your answer options. This waiting period allows the infused fluid to dissipate from the vein you're about to access. Next, your site selection is crucial. You must select a vein below or distal to the IV cannula. Never ever draw above the IV site. Drawing above is guaranteed to contaminate your sample with the infusion fluid. Once you've selected a vein below the IV, perform the venipuncture as usual. However, your first tube is not for the lab. You must draw a discard tube, typically 5 milliliters of blood, which you will then discard. This waste tube pulls any remaining IV fluid out of the vein, ensuring the subsequent samples are pure patient blood. After collecting the discard tube, you can then draw your required sample tubes in the correct order of draw. Finally, after the draw is complete, inform the nurse so they can restart the IV. And be sure to document that the sample was drawn from an arm with an IV, noting the specific location. This documentation is a key part of the process and a common exam point. The exam may also ask about heparin or saline locks. These are cannulas left in for intermittent access. While they aren't actively infusing, the line is filled with saline or a heparin solution to prevent clotting. The principle is the same as with a running IV. You must withdraw and discard an initial amount of blood, typically 5 milliliters, to clear the heparin or saline from the line before collecting your test samples. Failing to do so can contaminate a coagulation test with heparin or dilute other analytes with saline. To remember the critical steps for drawing from an IV arm, use the phrase stop, wait, below, waste. Stop the IV by asking the nurse. Wait for 2 minutes. Select a vein below the IV site. And waste the first 5 milliliters tube. Stop, wait, below, waste covers the core actions the exam will test you on. Be careful with tricky wording. A question might ask for your initial action. The answer is always to assess for an alternative site first. If the question forces you into the IV arm scenario, your first action is to ask the nurse to stop the infusion. They will also try to trick you with the site. If the IV is in the forearm, you can use the hand on the same arm. If the IV is in the hand, you cannot use that arm at all because there is no site below it. Watch for these anatomical details in the question stem. For free practice questions, AI-powered explanations, and more exam prep tools, visit openexamprep.com. That's openexamprep, all one word, .com.